What is up, guys? I'm the Flying Pig, and today we'll be taking a look at the 2015 MacBook Pro 13-inch. This is the last MacBook Pro with all the glorious ports, user-modifiable internals, and no butterfly keyboard. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, comment what you want to see next, and subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss out on future videos. Let's talk about price. You can't actually get these MacBooks new from Apple, obviously, and finding a third-party seller that sells new ones is sketchy and expensive. If you're going to get one of these Macs, you're probably going to get one refurbished. You can get them from private sources like on eBay, Kijiji, Craigslist, and Facebook Marketplace, and those range from around $400 to $600 US. Do be warned though, there are many scams on these kinds of listings, and you probably won't get a Mac in good condition. However, if you don't care what your machine looks like and are willing to read listings and contact the seller, then maybe this option is best for you. The other choice is to buy from refurbished stores, either locally or online. If you need a computer fast, then look up used Mac near me and you'll be able to find a bunch of places that sell these machines. You'll also most likely be able to see the product beforehand before buying it. Pricing there will be a little bit higher, but it won't necessarily be a ripoff, and it will likely be in much better condition than if you bought from a private seller. You can also buy online. I bought this Mac online on the Best Buy website, but it wasn't cheap. It was originally supposed to be nearly 13,000 Canadian dollars, a cosmetically large amount of money for a 5-year-old laptop. However, it was on sale for 1,000 Canadian dollars. This one was listed as mint condition, but had a few scratches as well as the staingate issue. I checked the other listings and they were all supposedly on sale, with the original price being well over $1,000, but listed as on sale for a slightly cheaper price. My guess is that they never actually sell the MacBooks for that original price, but actually put an expiration date on the sale price so people will rush to buy it. I'm not actually speaking from experience, just a trend I see when looking for refurbished products. Okay, but should you even consider this laptop? Why would you choose this laptop over another newer MacBook? The M1 MacBook Air could be found for around the same price on education pricing, and has far better performance scores than this 5-year-old MacBook Pro. Well, the first thing to consider is, just because the performance on this MacBook Air is good, doesn't mean the performance on this laptop is bad. Look at the difference in benchmarks. The M1 MacBook Air destroys the Intel MacBooks, but in day-to-day use, I've had no complaints whatsoever about performance. The MacBook Air beats even the 16-inch Intel MacBook Pro in terms of benchmarks, but there isn't a fan on the M1 MacBook Air, which means it can't do heavy tasks for a long period of time. Also, if you're willing to go that route, you can save a few $100s by buying a 2015 MacBook Pro rather than a 2020 M1 MacBook Air. If you buy the MacBook Air, you're probably going to have to buy dongles due to lack of ports, and dongles are expensive. You can't really cheap out on dongles either, as those are cheap for a reason and probably have cheaper quality build and are unreliable. The 2015 MacBook Pro has ports built in, which means no buying dongles, which means no losing dongles leading to buying more dongles. Even if they were the same price, you'd probably have to invest more in the MacBook Air just because of dongles. Also, keep in mind that you can't run heavy apps on the Air for a longer period of time due to the lack of a fan. Optimization will always bow down to raw power. Let's take a look at the build quality. This laptop still feels like $1,000,000 with that premium unibody design, fantastic keyboard, and a gorgeous Retina display. If you can find a MacBook Pro without staingate, it really sucks you in, and when you look back at a 1080p screen, your eyes really just can't go back. There is that potato 480p webcam though, so you might want to shell a few extra dollars for a better camera, or use your phone. There's also staingate. The previous user of this MacBook Pro clearly did not have a habit of wiping their screen or washing their hands, as you can clearly see the outlines of the keyboard and palm rest. It's unclear what causes staingate, but the leading theory is that the oil on your skin stays on the keyboard, trackpad, and palm rest. When you close the lid, the oil is transferred to the anti-glare coating on the screen. The acid breaks down the glue and causes the ugly staingate. While most cases are purely aesthetic ruining, severe cases may cause a color inaccurate display and may affect video or photo editing. Severe cases are rare, however they do exist. You also might need to contact the seller to make sure they aren't fooling you. My MacBook Pro was supposedly a mint condition model, but came with this. Honestly, If you have your screen on full brightness, you probably won't notice it. Also, Apple does still provide repairs for staingate up to 4 years after the original purchase date. However, that only applies for MacBook Pros bought 2016 and later as of 2020, so you may need to contact the original buyer who bought the machine directly from Apple. This MacBook was the first with a Force Touch trackpad, which, instead of physically clicking, there's a little taptic motor underneath the trackpad that vibrates every time you click. You can't even feel the difference, but you can click anywhere on the trackpad, and it's a lot more premium. If you power off the MacBook Pro, it's just a piece of glass. It's very cool, and you can tailor it with software. This is another one of those features where if you get used to it, you can't go back. The hinge is nice and weighted, with a glowing Apple logo if you're into that, so you can open the laptop with one hand. The keyboard is the classic, super comfortable chiclet scissor switch mechanism. It feels infinitely better than the butterfly keyboard, and a lot better than the Magic keyboard on the newer Macs, in my opinion. There's a lot more key travel in these keyboards than on a newer Mac, so that's a plus as well. Also, no reliability issues. Honestly, it just goes down to personal preference, but people enjoy the keyboard in general. And then here is something that you can't get on any new MacBook: VIO. This thing has the glorious MagSafe connector, which is honestly something so awesome before the iPhone ruined it. We wanted MagSafe on MacBooks, Apple, not crappy wallets that you definitely won't lose. Anyway, the idea behind MagSafe is that if someone trips over your cord, or is ripped out for whatever reason, your PC and yourself will be protected. Very genius. I wouldn't suggest using a third-party charger though, so invest in an authentic Apple charger if you must. It doesn't come cheap though. Next, we have two Thunderbolt 2 ports, which are useful for connecting displays, a USB 3.0 port, and a headphone jack. On this side, we have a USB 2.0 port, an HDMI port, and an SD card slot. If you film videos or shoot photos, or use a camera in general, then this will be a really useful feature you won't get on any other MacBook. It makes no sense why Apple decided to remove it, because it's such a thin and light component that it could fit onto the side very easily. It doesn't even look bad. So yeah, that's build quality. Now let's talk about actual use. Battery life varies on what you're doing, but I'd say you get around a day and a half of light to medium use. What really depends is the fact that if you buy private, you might need to check the battery or replace it. Refurbished manufacturers do replace your MacBook battery most of the time, but you can check the health by hitting Option and clicking the Apple menu. From here, click System Information and select Power. You can see the battery manufacturer, charge cycle, battery health, and more. My battery typically lasts a day when I'm just doing schoolwork and light photo and video editing, and I have around 5,000 milliamps left in my battery. Batteries typically last for 3 or 4 years, so it should be enough to get you through high school or university. If your battery seems to be failing, you could always buy a high-quality replacement battery for $100, and replacing it is relatively easy. In terms of performance, I have no complaints whatsoever. YouTube videos play with minimal or no lag, and video editing is very smooth, with render times about 8 or 9 minutes for a 5-minute video. Timeline playback is instant or near instant. Unlike the new M1 MacBook Air, the 2015 MacBook Pro has not one, but 2 fans to prevent overheating. This ensures that you can do heavier tasks for a longer period of time, not to mention the fact that Photoshop won't even be available on the M1 Max until mid-2021. I would suggest you replace the thermal paste though. The thermal paste that Apple applies when producing MacBooks is cheap enough to begin with. Add 5 or so years of use, and that stuff is due for replacement. You can get good thermal paste on Amazon for around $15, and the difference really is noticeable. What's great about the 2015 MacBook Pro is its upgradeability. While the inability to upgrade the RAM is kind of disappointing, you can always download more. I made a tutorial on how to do it in the card in the top right corner. Nah, I'm just kidding, you can't download physical hardware. However, you can upgrade the SSD storage. It's a fairly easy upgrade, and if you want more storage locally on your MacBook, you can buy an SSD. Prices vary. You can also replace various parts when needed, like the battery. New MacBooks have all their parts soldered in, so if something breaks, you'll either need to pay hundreds of dollars to fix it, or get a new computer. So performance is great, but video editing drains a lot of battery depending on the software you use. Online editors like WeVideo kind of drain the battery fast, in 2 or 3 hours. Local editing on simpler editing software like iMovie drain the battery slower, taking about 3 or 4 hours. But keep in mind that my battery has degraded a little, and wasn't at full capacity to begin with. If you get a battery with more capacity, you're generally going to get more time out of it. Still recommend plugging your computer in though. Now we talk about gaming. You know how MacBooks are really stubborn and won't turn the fan on until you get second-degree burns from typing? Yeah, well I tried running Asphalt 8 on it, and that's what happened. As soon as I booted up the game, I felt the hot underside on my lap, but no fan yet. The game was lagging, and then the fan kicked in. It was going crazy fast, and I could hear even over the sound effects of the game. Take the energy needed for that, plus the lack of integrated graphics, plus the fact that MacBooks were not built for gaming, I lost around 20% battery in around 5 or 6 minutes. That's a full battery drained in 25 to 30 minutes. Add the fact that you're turning your computer into a toaster, and ask yourself, can this game? No, it cannot. It won't be a pleasant experience and kills your computer slowly. Don't game, because you can't. Watching video is much better. It can take up to 12 hours to drain the battery watching video, according to Apple. The Retina display is beautiful. My only complaint is that the speakers could be a tiny bit louder. You can opt for the 15-inch model, which has forward-facing speakers instead of underside speakers. However, that laptop is larger and therefore heavier. You could always wear headphones though. This laptop, when I'm a big YouTuber, and in quarantine, a month can be a long time, so. Let's sum up the final pros and cons of the 2015 MacBook Pro versus the M1 MacBook Air. 2015 MacBook Pro has all the ports and I/O, saving you the money on having to purchase dongles. It has a nice, robust design and a keyboard with more key travel than the Air. You get 2 fans for extended workloads. There's a very comfortable, compact trackpad. I prefer smaller trackpads. If something breaks, you don't need to spend money on a new computer. You can just buy replacement parts. Buying one of these MacBooks is also generally cheaper than getting a new M1 MacBook Air while providing better value. However, it is an older machine, so the bezels on the screen look outdated. Software support won't really be a problem for at least 3 more years, and Big Sur runs just fine on it. Depending on how the previous owner treated the MacBook Pro, you may need to replace some parts, and the condition and price really varies depending on where you buy it and when you buy it. You may need to do a little hunting to find a machine that meets your preference. It's also really heavy, so if you travel a lot, unlikely in our current climate, it may hurt to carry along for a long time. You might want to choose the M1 MacBook Air if you want a thin and light notebook, and if you want that new machine experience. The Air also has superb battery life, reaching up to 15 hours. If you travel a lot or aren't in one place for a long time, then I suggest the Air. However, the Air is generally more expensive, and you are missing out on the glorious ports. While performance is better, it can't handle performance-intensive workloads for a long time due to a lack of a fan. However, you can buy external cooling systems, but then there's not really a point in the portability feature. You decide, what do you want in a MacBook? Oh yeah, did I mention that MacBooks are kind of bulletproof? This way, if some terrifying sunglass-wearing robot comes in with a minigun, you can be sure you're safe.
Oh, my back!
Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe. This is probably one of my biggest projects to date, and yeah, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe. Every time I see that sub count go up by 1, it really makes my day. I'm actually happy. I feel like being successful, it's really a great feeling. And by the way, this entire video will be shot from my iPhone 7 and edited on the MacBook Pro. And also, most of the videos on this channel were edited on the MacBook Pro, so yeah, enjoy this. It's gonna be really cool.